Cristian Cueva, bienvenido a Eleva tu Futuro. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Catalina. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I understand we have a shared connection. We're gonna start off by giving her a big shout out. It's tu prima, your cousin, who I know and works at Montgomery College. So we're gonna give her a shout out. Hi, Maria, and thank you for always supporting us here at the pod at Eleva tu Futuro. Well, Christian, I am so excited to connect with you because you not only did you come through MC, but you have gone really, really far in your first career as an architect. You are going to share what that was like, but also just the pivot that you did in your career, and now you're in tech. And so I'm super excited about this conversation. Also, one of the few episodes we're going to do in English, so that too is exciting, of course. Pero siempre para nuestra gente, we're here, and so you can always find a translated show notes and translated transcript of this episode. All right. So, Christian, tell me where does it all start for you? You grew up in Baltimore, right?
I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. Um, I've lived in and out of the city, and eventually I found my way to Montgomery College, the other side of Maryland. So, yeah, I come from a Peruvian background. Both my parents are Peruvian, but I was born here, so born and raised as a minority, and kind of in between both worlds, trying to figure out, both the Latino side and the American side. Yeah.
That's always a fun thing to navigate, right? Or a bright
Yeah.
like being bicultural, not always easy, but adds a lot of fun at times. Now, cuéntame, how did you find your way to Montgomery College specifically?
I always had an interest in design, and always this wanting to help people and the environment. I was sketching portraits of my family since I was 5 years old. And I think being Peruvian and being exposed to both my family in Peru and also living here in America, both in the city and suburbs, I was exposed to different types of communal environments. And I knew that I wanted to do something impactful with my career through design. So around my early teens, that's when I discovered architecture and its power that you can get through design to be able to help people both at a small scale and large scale, depending what you specifically get into, whether it's architecture for buildings or landscape architecture for parks or urban design for trying to design big cities. You can really niche out into very different areas. And so, discovering architecture in my early teens, eventually meeting some architects as well, inspired me to want to pursue that. How I found myself at Montgomery College. So when I started out, um, about a decade ago, it was definitely challenging to find the schools and apply to and get proper funding and scholarships in order to attend those schools. And me coming from a minority background, I always had my family and financial barriers that were always kind of holding me back. Um, and I kind of, at some point, I didn't think I was good enough to kind of pursue a career in architecture. And when I found Montgomery College, it was the only community college in Maryland that had a architecture program. So when I discovered that, I called up, I spoke to the chair there, and yeah, I actually opened up and told her all of my worries and my struggles. And she just immediately told me, like, look, Christian, I'm not going to, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, this isn't an easy career, but as long as you have a passion for design and wanting to improve the environment, I believe you can do it. And when she said those words to me, it got me excited. I did a trip there. She gave me a tour. I became passionate about it, applied, and that's where I started my career. Montgomery College was one of the places where I felt like I could finally fit in. It stems from a background of being a minority and growing up in a predominantly white black city. So in Baltimore, as a minority, I always were in different friend groups, community groups, where I might be the only Lat- Latino person there. I also felt like that when I was back home sometimes too. Like even though my family was Peruvian, they raised me, but sometimes I felt like I was a little too American to completely fit in with my cousins and aunts and my uncles and so on and so forth. Um, so yeah, it was like a weird dilemma for me. And then when I went to Montgomery College, I started meeting so many people like me. And I was just like, I can't believe there's a place like this in Maryland. I had no idea that, there were a lot of like Latino born Americans that are also going through similar stuff that I'm going through. So that really helped me fit in right away.
Mm.
And until today, a lot of those people that I met are still some of my best friends today. Yeah.
I love hearing that because it does kind of shock people in a positive way. I think we when we do land MC and maybe when we haven't really grown up in the county, it is a bit like, whoa, how is it that, I'm walking past people who are speaking so many different languages, right? And yet we're all here and it feels very collegial, right? So I wanna hear from you. What was your so you graduated MC and you stayed in the state, right? You went to Morgan State, correct?
Yes. Very
And
state.
then how did you begin to kind of continue this path in architecture? And eventually, how did you land an Ivy League school full ride for your dual master's degree?
Well, that is a huge story in itself. First off, I had no intentions of going to graduate school to begin with. A lot of my professors started to tell me that I should think otherwise because they saw me as a talented individual. At that point, I had won numerous design awards for different reasons. Um, I was nominated for AIA awards, which is a big deal in the architecture community. And I began to give it some thought. I was like, why not? Let's look into schools and see what it's about. It was the most overwhelming process uh, that I ever did, for sure. And the people around me is what gave me the strength to continue uh, to continue that trajectory and just see what opportunities were out there for me and what was possible. So I started to look at schools like College Park for graduate studies, like just starting local. But it was my professors and my friends around me that told me, sometimes you find better opportunities outside of where you grew up. And I didn't really think about it too much. But once I started to get responses from these universities, I realized, wow, that's so true. Um, the Ivy League that I ended up going to was the University of Pennsylvania. I applied there for their landscape architecture program because I realized towards the end of my architecture studies at Morgan State that I really had a passion, and I discovered this through putting my portfolio together. That I really had a passion not just for trying to help people, but also helping the nature, our physical environment, cities, and like how we are able to live with these different systems. Once I got into the University of Pennsylvania, I'm going to be honest, I didn't have a full ride scholarship at first. They gave me very little money. And right away, I was already discouraged. I was just like, all right, well, that's it. I can't afford to go to that school. It's too expensive. Like, that was the first thing that went through my mind. But again, through proper mentorship and encouragement through my professors and peers, they told me, you know what? Go to open house, talk to the people there, talk to the chair, to the professor, meet people, have conversations. You just never know what might happen. So that's what I did. I went. Um, I signed up to have a meeting with the chair of the department there. Went in and I was like, "Look, this is my dream school. I want to come here, but I need more money. I can't afford it." He looked at me, very professional. He was just like, "Sorry, can't get you the money. We don't have it." My dreams were crushed again for a second time, right? I went back to school and I was ready to give up. But again, I was encouraged again. You know what? If this is the school you want to go to and you really believe this is where you belong, you should fight for it. And I don't think it's a very common thing to encourage people to fight for something that you've already been rejected to twice, especially by the chair of the department. So what I ended up doing isn't written anywhere. This is outside of the script. I just went and ask for recommendations from my professors and to send it to them directly. I met someone, a famous professor at Penn who is from Venezuela, and we both exchanged hellos because we both knew we were Latino. and I was like one of the only Latinos there. And so I found his email, reached out to him, told him my situation, and he decided to advocate for me. He also wrote an email. And again, I got a response, and they're like, "Look, we know what you're trying to do, but we just don't have the money. Thank you for trying." And I again wrote back, and I think I ended up having like 5, 6 different exchanges of email. And by the sixth one, they responded with, "Congratulations, you have a full ride scholarship." And it was never my full intention to get a full ride scholarship because they had told me so many times that that wasn't a possibility, but I at least wanted to get maybe half a scholarship, like just more than what they initially gave me, to give me some hope and to give me that flexibility to choose if this was the space for me. And yeah, graduated with 2 masters, one in architecture and one in landscape architecture.
That's what I call ponerle ganas and
Yeah,
not give
correct.
up.
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's amazing. Anybody would have just given up after 1 or 2 no's, right?
yeah,
But it does I think it does kinda put that little, bug in your head, like, "Okay, what happens if I do keep trying?" And,
yeah,
I'm reminded I don't know if you saw this, but a few years back, there was this movie about this Latino astronaut, Jose Hernandez, and he got rejected from NASA multiple times, maybe 10 times, and now he's an astronaut, right?
yeah.
So, it's stories like that that remind me that, there's a reason why, uh, there's so many successful Latino immigrants. It's because we don't just take no for an answer, right? Like, we come from parents that came here and gave up everything. So, that grit is kind of burned within it just wired within us in many ways. I would love to hear so much more about your experience there, and maybe we can kind of touch upon it. But I also want to get to the rest of your story because it's so so good, and I'm curious, because after you graduate, now you've got these incredible credentials on your resume, and you begin working for firms in New York, correct?
Yeah, so one of the first firms that I was able to work for was in New York, and it was one of my dream offices that I always wanted to work at, the Arca Group. And there I was able to kind of live out the dream as the architect I was wanted to be, work on projects both in landscape and architecture, impactful projects, projects abroad. Yeah, it was just a sublime experience for me. And just living in New York, that's where you find all the opportunities, the hustle, the startups, and um, just being in that mindset and working with all these talented people and great minds really added to the growth not just as an architect but as a designer as well. One of the things that I learned at these offices, besides team collaboration, was also just being able to see a problem, and being able to design a solution from different types of perspectives. So I ended up working in 2 different offices in New York angles. At some point, I had to leave the office because I wanted to pursue more of a niche into landscape architect. So I eventually applied to another firm called SCAPE Landscape Architecture. And I really loved working for them because their work was based on improving the environments, waterfronts, climate change. They confronted social issues, and the work that I did there felt more meaningful and more impactful and kind of more aligned with why I decided to study architecture. So yeah, I'm very thankful that I was able to kind of have have those experiences coming out of school.
So you're working, you're kind of at the pinnacle of your field for a starting, somebody who's starting in architecture. You're working in a really prestigious firm, and everything seems to be going right and really well for you. But I know you kind of hit a wall at some point. Talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, so I had when I was working in New York, I eventually was approached by another office uh, to join them here where I live now in Philadelphia. Also, since I went to school in Philadelphia, it was already a city that I knew that I would like. So I decided to go back. And when I came back, uh, everything was great. I was so grown within my landscape architecture profession. But as you mentioned, the wall that I hit was the firm ended up having to do some layoffs. And since I was one of the last people to get hired at that office, um, they had to make a very tough decision and lay me off. It wasn't for performance reasons, but more just there just wasn't enough project and not enough uh, money to sustain their people. When that happened, I had began to reflect on how much I was making, what my life goals were, where I wanted to be. I was thinking more than just myself, but also for my family who I wanted to be able to support as they aged. And I didn't see architecture as the field that was going to allow me to have that type of flexibility in the future. So being laid off, I thought, you know what, this is kind of a perfect opportunity to focus. I've already fulfilled all my goals within the field. I've worked for the offices I've always wanted to work for. So I started looking into different professions and found product design. And I had learned about product design years prior during the pandemic through some friends, and they were urging me to make the jump. Um, but I just wasn't 100% ready at the time, even though like I had some interest. And for those who don't know, product design and architecture has a lot of relevance with each other, a lot of transferable skills. Uh, they're both focused in design. You're designing for the user, right? There's a lot of research, design process that is very similar as well. And so to me, it kind of felt like a natural transition. And being within the tech space, that also meant I would be making 2 to 3 times more money than I would have been making as an architect. So I decided, you know what? Let's try the jump. Let's do it. Um, I started a boot camp with Springboard, uh, got the certificate in product design uh, late last year, but started my own LLC prior to that because I figured why why build a portfolio of projects that are just kind of made up, kind of like what you do when you're in school when I can actually challenge myself, go get my own projects, and then make that become my own portfolio.
Mhm.
And I was actually inspired by an individual who also went to MC. He made the transition from an architect into product design as well, but he did it 5 years before I did. He now works at Yahoo, and he specifically works within design systems. And he was telling me, look, like the great thing about the tech space is it is easier to be an entrepreneur. Like it doesn't cost much to start your own thing. Like you don't have to have a physical brick and mortar to start a business. You can, just need a computer, good Wi-Fi, um, and the space to be able to do some digital projects. And he's also the one that encouraged me, like, looking to having an LLC, looking to getting a business account, business credit card, businesses, like and these are all things I always wanted to do. Like I always wanted to have my own business when I reflect back in my childhood. And I always wanted to do that with architecture, but could never find myself to do it. There are kind of a lot of barrier and stages that you have to go through in architecture. For example, when you graduate, even though you might be working for your dream firm or whatever, you still need to get licensed at some point. And getting licensed, there's like these series of exams that also cost money. You need to pass, and then you also need to kind of maintain your licensure per year, and that's what allows you to get that official name as an architect. Um, and just like I don't know, knowing because my network is so deep and knowing the struggles that comes with it, uh, I just decided that it was kind of time to try something else. And to me, product design was like it.
Right. You also mentored a number of summer interns when you were working in New York. Um, Many of them, from diverse backgrounds, minorities. What what did you learn from that experience as a mentor, and even just observations that you may have about the diversity gap in architecture? Like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. It took me a long time to understand. And so basically after working at Biarca Angles, I eventually worked for this company, SCAPE Landscape Architecture, where I was able to um start not only work as a landscape architect, but also take part in their DEI committee. And it was there where we started this program where we would teach landscape architecture to communities who didn't have access to design in general or had a lack of access. And we really wanted to aim the program specifically for minorities. And I was able to take part in that program from when it first kickstarted and for the following 3 years. So I really got to see it grow. And I think one of the cool things about the program is, like we took in these kids who had a lack in access in design education, but had an interest. And we took them in for about a week in our office, paid them a stipend to come and learn about landscape architecture, and had these really fun things to do for them. Between site visits, fun lectures, meeting the employees, going out and having an ice cream party, right, to kind of get to know each other and such. And by the end of the week, they came in not knowing anything about landscape architecture and walked away talking about systems, environmental change, sea level rise, um, what it meant to design, how you can affect your communities. And it's just kind of like very, very not just fulfilling, but just exciting to see uh, the positive change that we were doing. But at the same time, and this also stemmed from pandemic days, Black Lives Matter. Like, I think that's what initiated some of these programs across architecture firms in general. And I started to realize, you know, it's not just about the lack of education, lack of mentorship that minorities don't have. A really big part of it is also um, finance and not being able to make enough and being able to survive within an architecture environment. And this was a common conversation that I was having with all my minority friends, my black friends, my Latino friends, my friends who uh, came from another country. Like this was something that everyone agreed upon, and it's not really talked about. Um, and yeah, I started to kind of reassess what I was teaching. But
And
by the way,
what you're getting at is this idea that the profession kinda there's a lot of like, you can make it to the top, um, and yet the compensation like, it has a lot of prestige, but the compensation isn't necessarily correlated to that.
yeah, there's a lot of imbalance. At some point you're making enough to be content with, that you're okay. But that might take somewhere between 6 to 10 years of straight hustle. And even then, you're not making what a doctor might or a lawyer might. Like I don't know why, but when people hear architecture, they think, oh wow, like, you know, they make a lot of money. And that might be true for the founders or partners. Um, might be true for people who have been in the industry for a very long time, but when you're first starting your career, there is a clear hierarchy that you need to follow when you enter an office. And I'm not really sure how this is in other industries, but like they don't care how many internship experiences you have, or they don't care if you've worked professionally for 3 years in another country. Those 3 years have to be here in the States. There's like a lot of politics that allow them to kind of manipulate and like, dictate how much you get paid. And so there's this like sense of unfairness that isn't really talked about. And so I think whenever I give design advice for someone who wants to pursue architecture, I tell them it's a very fulfilling career. It's great. Um, but you also need to know these things. Is money something that's going to be important for you in the future? And if it is, this is what you need to know. And this is what you need to think about.
Now that you're pursuing design and you're the owner of your not just your business, but your time and how you want to focus your talents, your skills and how and all of that. How would you say that your background in architecture gives you an advantage as a designer, digital designer?
I mean, it helps me so much. It gives me such a strong foundation, and I think, like, it's not like I don't think you can just jump directly from from being an architect to becoming a product designer. There is kind of like this relearning that you have to do, you know? Um, but because I went through rigorous programs in learning how to look at things from different perspectives, I feel that I was able to kind of learn so much quicker than others who don't come from a design background. And I think this is true. Like when you're jumping from one design profession to another, it becomes easier when you know one and you're kind of to make, those transferable skills work for you in another design profession. Like if you want to go from being an art teacher to an architect, or a digital product designer to a physical product designer, or a product designer to an architect, I feel like there are transferable skills that can help people make that switch. And I think for me in particular, because I designed in so many different scales, uh, product design is almost no different, right? Like you're designing, for example, if you're designing a mobile app, right? Like that's very accessible, not just not just for not just for the rich, but also you know the lower income making families. Uh, Most people own a phone, and it's very accessible. And that's something that I was able to kind of just learn right away, And when it comes to scale and being able to think in different scales and think systematically, um, being able to understand that what you experience through your phone versus your desktop, right, um, is also very relatable. So I think architecture gave me a very strong foundation, uh, and has made the transition a lot more smoother.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of risk involved in making a pivot like this, in kind of retooling and hoping to land new clients or even a job. So, what made you want to take that huge jump? When
Yeah.
you were so marketable as an architect, right? Because like that, how do you think through that decision?
It was tough. I mean, to kind of pivot and say goodbye to something that has been your life career, I did 9 years, yeah, somewhere between 9 to 10 years of architecture school, and then worked in for 5 years professional. But at least for me specifically, that was kind of a chapter that finally closed, and I was ready for a new chapter. Um, and for me, I don't see it as a restart. I see it more of like a natural progression, you know? Like I'm not like architecture is one thing, but it's under an umbrella of design. And there's so many ways to design. And for me, designing in the physical space has its importance, but so does designing in the digital space, especially since digital environments is becoming a lot more easier to get to. I think having people like architects really think about that space for users becomes a lot more essential. So that's how I kind of see it. And as an architect, I always was kind of the guy who loved learning new softwares, loved learning new things, jumping on things that made me uncomfortable. So to me, product design doesn't make that any different. And even though I studied a certification within product design, just like as an architect, how I was ambitious and open enough to kind of jump into urban design, jump into landscape architecture, jump into different scales and like things, I'm the same way in product design. So even though I got a certificate in product design or UX UI design, um, I've also learned how to do branding design. And recently, I've also learned how to do digital marketing. And to me, it creates this, full circle ecosystem that supports each other. And yeah, I have to thank my architecture background for allowing me to kind of have that agency for myself. You know?
What are some some products that you want to be designing, or what feels kind of like just most exciting about the near future?
For me specifically, I'm really excited about growing my LLC. It's really exciting to get your own clients, see them happy when you deliver your product. Um, and I really want to continue to grow my knowledge within the space. So I have a lot of knowledge within design, but this year I plan to go into development. So specifically front end development. Um, and at some point learn back end as well to become a full stack engineer. And I don't think like this isn't a necessity. This is just our curiosity.
So if you could give yourself advice to the Christian from 10 years ago, what would you say?
Patience, you know, and enjoy the process. Trust the people around you, you know. Um, I think that's what's key. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, your day is not gonna bring you joy. Like you really have to enjoy what you're doing. And I think for me specifically, um, especially speaking for this transition, architecture to an extent wasn't giving me the same joy that it did when I first started off. And I think it's okay to pivot and transition. Like I think there's a scarce as we get older that that's a bad idea or that's not something good to do. But if you really dig deep and really listen to yourself and your insides are telling you you need to change, I say go for it. You know, study your context. Is it possible? If not, how do you make it possible? Like I can't tell you how many different Google Sheets I have planning out my transition, how to go about it, rethinking my like career, my trajectory, where I want to be, uh, creating that vision to strive for. That's my advice. Yeah.
I think that you've redefined what success looks like, and for you, I think it's like an alignment of your priorities, and I think that's really really important because priorities can shift, right? But I think that for many Latinos, we we come with a set of priorities that are kind of built into our family, right? We take care of each other. We got to think about finances differently, for not just our parents, but the family we want to have someday. So I think having just honest reflection early on is really important. It helped me define the parameters of where I wanted to take my career, and I think that you're doing so as well, and it's awesome, it's exciting, the risk taking of starting a business, and then just kind of growing, continuing to grow as a professional. I think all of that is just speaks to your determination to design your future the way that you see it, right?
Yeah. And, you know, to that, I just want to add, no one can ever take away what you learn and your skills overall. So learning something new, is not gonna, make whatever career you're in worse. It's just gonna make you more marketable, make you better in the future. If I ever wanted to go back into architecture, I can. Like that's my background. Uh, and yeah, that's what when I was able to kind of make that mind flip and switch in my head, that's what started opening up these new opportunities for me. Just kind of realizing that change is possible. Yeah.
Christian, thank you so much. It has been un placer to just sit here, talk to you, learn your story. And hey, you're welcome back on campus anytime. I think my office may be located where you might have taken classes now in the
Really?
Texan. So yeah,
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Carolina. Hopefully I can visit the MC campus sometime, and if I do, I will definitely reach out.
yeah, well, we're here. Thank you for joining us on Eleva tu Futuro. Have a wonderful rest of your day.